All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you all for coming. My name is Megan Dales. I'm the program manager for the Northern Arizona College Resource Center. We are an outreach program based out of Flagstaff. We work individually and in group settings with students and families, helping them prepare for their college going processes. So we help with college application, career advising, scholarships, FAFSA, finding best fit schools, whether that be trade school, university, or community college, just overall preparing students for their transition to college. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA. This presentation is being recorded, so it will be available afterwards in a very easy to access link. So if you are not able to attend, hopefully you're watching later on the recording. For those of you who are in attendance, please feel free to ask questions via the chat box. I have one of my employees, Amy, who's available to kind of alert me that you all are asking questions. I'm using a cool format in Prezi for video so that my presentation can show up right next to me, so you guys aren't just staring at a boring PowerPoint all the time. You get to see my face. So I'm not really able to monitor the chat box, but Amy will be helping with that. For those of you who are watching the recording later, we will have the contact information for our organization at the end of the presentation. Feel free to call or email us at any time with any questions that you have. With that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. So what is the FAFSA? The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's the form used by the United States Department of Education to determine your expected family contribution, essentially by conducting a needs analysis based on financial information. So what that means is basically they're looking at your financial history to determine how much money a student is eligible to receive from the federal government in order to go to college, trade school, or university. So it's a complicated formula, but a very easy process to access that. So we are going to talk more about that. So why should you complete a FAFSA? First, it gives you an informed decision. So it allows you to choose a school based on the amount of money that you are given through the government. A lot of people think that this is a loan application, that you're applying through the FAFSA to receive a loan. While loans are one aspect that you can receive, it's not the only thing that you can receive. There's also free sources of money that you can receive as well. It's also a great plan B, so you never know what can happen. I've had students in the past who didn't think that they needed additional financial assistance to go to school, and then something happened and they needed additional money. So something maybe like a global pandemic that caused a lot of families to experience financial hardship. The FAFSA can be a great option for plan B. And on top of that, it increases your likelihood of attending and completing. So 90% of high school seniors who complete a FAFSA end up attending college directly from high school. Scholarships. So some scholarships do require a FAFSA on file to be eligible. One of those scholarships is the Navajo Nation Scholarship. So if you are planning on applying to that scholarship fund, you definitely want to have a FAFSA on file. And then it also gives you an admissions edge. So let's say you're applying to a particularly competitive university or school. Having a FAFSA on file shows the admissions office that you are serious about enrolling and attending school because you've gone through all of the specific processes that you need. So oftentimes we hear from a lot of students and families that they think they make too much money, they won't be eligible for any financial aid. And my rule of thumb is always apply at least that first year. So that first year you're going to be going to college, trade school, or university to see what you'll be eligible for. You never know what you'll get. I know I wasn't eligible for anything besides student loans. And then one year, while my brother also happened to be in college, I was eligible for a Pell Grant. So we both got a small Pell Grant because we both kept doing the FAFSA. So I always recommend students do it as a great plan B in case something happens. Do it so that you have options, and do it because you'll never know what you're going to get. So what is the expected family contribution? I talked about this on the first slide. So the EFC, or expected family contribution, is the number that determines a student's eligibility for federal student aid. The FAFSA is the form that we fill out in order to determine and calculate the EFC. So the EFC gets sent to the school that the student is planning on attending, and then is subtracted from the overall cost of attendance for that school, and that determines the amount of financial need that the school needs to provide to the student in the form of grants, loans, federal Perkins loans, federal work study, and sometimes Parent Plus loans. So a lot of variation, a lot of students federal work study, that is a job on campus. A lot of students aren't familiar with that term. So federal work study is basically a guarantee that you will receive a job on campus, and that money is considered part of your financial aid package. So the only way to determine if you're eligible for this free money through grants, through federal student loans, through federal work study is to complete the FAFSA. So where do you fill out the FAFSA? So the FAFSA is going to be found at that link right there, fafsa.ed.gov. It is a .gov website. I always really stress this to students and families who haven't applied before. There are some websites, like a .com website, that are scam websites that will make you pay to complete the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid, so you should never have to pay to complete it. So seniors in the class of 2021, so that's you seniors this year, you're going to submit the 2021-2022 FAFSA. So we're always submitting the FAFSA for the following school year. So looking ahead, 2021-2022 is going to be your first year in college, trade school, or university. So that's the application we want to complete. The application opens on October 1st. So you have one whole month to prepare for this application. You cannot complete it prior to October 1. Every year it opens October 1 for the following school year. And then don't complete it any later than June 30th, 2021. So yes, you can technically backdate your FAFSA. So you have until June 30th, 2021. However, it is a first come, first serve basis, especially for those things like the Pell Grant, that's free money that you don't have to pay back. That definitely goes really quickly. So you want to make sure to complete the FAFSA as close to October 1 as possible. I always like to highlight too that state and college deadlines can be as early as November 2020. So these deadlines are typically priority deadlines, and what they're saying is that the school is saying, get us your FAFSA by this date so that you can receive the most amount of financial aid as possible. So double check with any schools that you're planning on applying to get your FAFSA in as early as possible to receive the most amount of aid. So before starting the FAFSA, it makes sense to gather some of the documents that you need. I always recommend that students and families compile all of these documents into one file. Parents, you might already have a file collected with a lot of these documents. So they're all going to be listed here. Student driver's license is an important one. And then student and parents' social security numbers, W-2 forms and records of money earned, federal income tax form, records of untaxed income, bank statements, if you own a business or a farm or have any real estate records, if you own houses outside of your current residence, and then records of stocks, bonds, and other investments. So it seems really lengthy, but I promise you that the actual questions on the FAFSA that refer to your financial situation are a lot simpler. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. I do want to point out that they are going to be asking for 2019 tax information. I know some of you may not have your 2019 taxes completed yet, so I really urge you to get those completed as soon as possible so that it's an easy process. 2019, again, we're looking at prior year. So the 2021-2022 FAFSA is the application we're completing. Prior year puts us at the 2019 tax information. So if you folks have any questions about issues on filing taxes or things, please come talk to me. There are quite a few resources that can help you file your taxes and get that all set up. So come chat with me afterwards or take down our contact info. Okay, so completing the FAFSA, your first step is that you're going to create an FSA ID. So the FSA ID is your username, password, and electronic signature for the FAFSA. So the student needs one and one parent needs one. So again, only one parent and the student. It is linked to your social security number. So students do have to have a social security number in order to create an FSA ID. Parents, you also have to have a social security number to create an FSA ID. However, if you do not have a social security number, you can fill out the FAFSA for the student without having a social security number. So if you have a situation like that, please feel free to ask me any questions. I'd be happy to walk you through that process. Again, students must have one. Parents, you do not have to have one. We can still complete the FAFSA for you. So the FSA website right there, fafsa.ed.gov. Again, it's a .gov website, sensitive information. We're using our social security number, so we want to make sure it's a .gov website. The FSA ID is going to stay with you as you move throughout your college process. That goes for both students and parents. So remember, I mentioned making that portfolio where you keep all your important documents. Definitely recommend putting your FSA ID information in there. It is kind of a pain to try and recover if you've forgotten it. So better yet, just write it down now so you don't forget it. A lot of our families and students, they want to put it in their cell phone. As a reminder, if you get a new cell phone, it may not transfer over to your new cell phone. So I always recommend keeping a paper copy on you of that FSA ID. The FSA ID can actually be created at any time. So you could finish this presentation and go create that FSA ID tonight, as long as you remember to write it down so you don't forget it when the FAFSA actually opens on October 1st. Okay. So create the FSA ID. Next, we're going to actually start the FAFSA. So kind of a two-step process. Create the FSA ID and then complete the FAFSA. So the first thing that we're going to see is this login page. So the student is actually going to log in with their FSA ID. So they're going to enter that FSA ID into the FAFSA webpage. It's going to bring us to a page that looks like this. And we're going to select Start the FAFSA. Be sure to select the 2021-2022 school year. So you can see how old my picture is. I've been doing this presentation for a very long time, so long that my picture says 2014-2015. But we want to make sure that we're selecting 2021-2022. You will have the option to select 2019, 2020, or 2020, 2021. That is not the correct one. Ignore that one. That's this current school year. So remember, 2021, 2022. Alrighty, so completing the FAFSA. The first page that we're going to see in the FAFSA is going to be student demographic information. So it's going to ask us your name, your address, gender, birthday, all that good stuff. A lot of it will be auto-filled because you logged in with your FSA ID. Some of it you'll have to fill in. Then you're going to go to your school selections. You can select up to 10 schools on the FAFSA. That is the limit. You cannot put more than 10 schools. I always urge students only put schools that you're also planning on applying to so as not to take up too much space. If a school receives your FAFSA, but you don't have an application on file with them, they aren't going to put the 2 and 2 together, so they won't know to save that FAFSA. So always make sure you have to apply to the school and you have to complete the FAFSA, okay? Then it's going to get to student dependency info. So a student in the eyes of the federal government, I have a lot of parents who go, well, my student's 18 years old. I shouldn't have to do the FAFSA with them. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the federal government, a student is considered dependent upon their parents for the purposes of federal financial aid until they hit some certain markers. Some of those markers are being 24 years old, being an active duty military, being a parent, being married. So unless your student fulfills one of those things, you will have to be report your financial information on the FAFSA. After this presentation, I will be emailing out the link to the recording as well as a handout that covers the documents you need for the FAFSA and then goes through who is my parent on the FAFSA, which kind of talks into the student dependency information. If you guys have any questions about, am I independent, am I a dependent, please come chat with me. There's not a situation that I haven't seen. I'm happy to walk you through that process and chat with you, and we'll figure out exactly how to file the FAFSA for you. Okay, then we're gonna get to the parent information. This is the information that everyone kind of dreads because it has the parent financial information, which can be somewhat confusing. So first, we're going to fill out parent demographic information. So there are always some questions here about divorced parents or remarried parents. So if you are a family with divorced parents, this parent who's going to file the FAFSA is going to be the one who provides the most financial support for that child. If it is a 50-50 split, then you can choose which parent you report on the FAFSA. If that parent has remarried and that new step parent is living in the household, you will need to report their financial information on the FAFSA. So again, step parent in the household does need to be reported on that FAFSA. If you all have questions about that, again, please come chat with me. I'm going to have that handout that has this really handy flow chart that you can follow, but I'm always happy to help. We're going to fill out parent W-2 or tax information as well. There's a very handy tool called the IRS data retrieval tool. And what it does is the parent's going to plug in their FSA ID, going to link to the IRS, and it's going to pull all of that information into the FAFSA. So it's going to be a really quick and easy process. I highly recommend that you use it. First of all, it helps you because it keeps it very simple and easy to fill out the FAFSA. Second of all, it also helps the schools that you're applying to and submitting your FAFSA to because they know that that information is as accurate as it can be. So you won't have to supply supporting information to the school. They're going to know it's straight from the IRS. You're also going to need to report any untaxed income. So be sure to be keeping track of that. If you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, so again, parent W tax information. Just to restate, we're looking at 2019 tax information for this FAFSA. Next year it will change. We'll be looking at a different year, but this year we're looking at 2019 tax information. One thing I do want to stress about this, folks, since we are experiencing a global pandemic and a lot of families' income has changed, please still use your 2019 tax information. If you have experienced financial hardship and your tax information from 2019 is reflecting more money than what you currently are making, then you are able to adjust that and appeal that with the schools that the student is applying to. So when you're completing the FAFSA, still report your 2019 tax information, even if it does not reflect where you're currently at financially. Once your FAFSA is received by the school, you will have the chance to appeal that financial aid package, and you will have the opportunity to provide documentation saying that your financial aid or saying that your financial situation is different than what was reflected in 2019. This is very common nowadays due to COVID, due to loss of wages. So this is not unusual that schools are going to be seeing this. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of this and appeal that so that the student gets offered the most amount of financial aid that they can possibly receive. All right, so now that we've done parental financial information, we also need to do student financial information. So we are going, if the student has worked in the year 2019, we are going to need their W-2. If the student has filed taxes in the year 2019, we are going to need their tax info. And then if they have any untaxed income. This is usually the easiest part of the FAFSA because not many of our students have worked, and if they have worked, they haven't really made enough money to either file taxes or to really report much income. But if a student did work and did make money or did file taxes, we do need to report that information on the FAFSA. All right, and then we're done. So you're going to sign the FAFSA using that FSA ID, and then you're going to submit it. So signing it again, we use that FSA ID. The student will enter their FSA ID, sign, and submit. And signing in this term is really just clicking a button. Then the parent is going to sign and submit the FAFSA. Now parents, if you did not have a social security number and were unable to create an FSA ID, you will have the option to print the signature page and we will mail it in for you. So if that is something you need to do, please let us know. We can help set you up with the resources to do that. Once the FAFSA is submitted, you will be given a confirmation page that looks like this. You can see here we have a confirmation number, and then you can see down here the estimated family contribution. So again, this is the number that the government has determined the family will contribute to the student's education. This number is what gets sent to the schools, and then the schools subtract that number from the cost of attendance, and then they determine what type of aid the student will receive, whether that's in the form of grants, loans, scholarships, etc. All right, so you've submitted, you've signed, it's gone out into the ether. What's next? So students, you should be looking for your student aid report or your SAR. The student aid report is sent to you within 72 hours of submitting your FAFSA. So your process is not complete until you receive your SAR. A lot of parents are like, wait a second, Megan, what do you mean it gets sent to my student's email? They don't even check their email. And I completely understand. Unfortunately, today is the day your student is going to need to start to check their email, because important documentation is going to be coming through their email in the form of an SAR. So the student aid report is really just a compilation of what was reported on the data. So students and families, you can review it just to make sure it all looks good. You can review the colleges that you submitted. Do not stress. You can always log back in and change the colleges that you submitted. So again, I said that you can submit up to 10 schools on the FAFSA. You can log back in and change those 10 schools. You can add some, you can delete some. So that process, after you receive your SAR, you can go in and do that. Your school will receive your SAR and your expected family contribution. So again, we have to apply to the school and we have to submit the FAFSA. The school will get that information. They will review the student aid report, and then they will provide information to the student about any additional required forms they need to submit. So like I said, they get the student aid report. Watch for the financial aid packages from colleges. Watch for communication from colleges. First, we're watching for our student aid report. Second, we're watching for any communication from schools that we have applied to and sent our FAFSA to. You're going to want to log into your student account with the schools you have applied and sent your FAFSAs to. They will let you know directly through the school if you need to provide additional information. This process is called the verification process. It means that they're verifying the information that you reported on the FAFSA. So again, we want to double check with the school. If we are going to appeal the financial aid package, meaning we did not get offered enough, maybe because our 2019 taxes do not adequately reflect the amount of money we're making this year, then this is the time that we want to do it. We want to communicate with the school to appeal that process and get additional funds dispersed to us. So students, families, if you have any questions about the verification process, please let me know. I'm more than happy to walk you through that process. It can be a little bit confusing. A lot of times our schools use different language that we don't really recognize, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to walk you through that process and help you. We've got about 10 staff members on hand who can walk you through that process and help you with those documents. But this is very important. Students will not receive their financial aid package until all required documents are submitted. Schools will typically email students, send letters home, or they will just post it to the student's account. So we have to be very vigilant during this process. And as always, if you have any questions at all, please let us know. So we will be doing FAFSA office hours throughout the month of October, starting on October 6th. Those will be open from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. They will be virtual, so they will be through Zoom, so you can go ahead and drop in. We'll have mentors available. We can do a private breakout room and walk you through that process. I have done several FAFSAs through Zoom, and it's actually kind of efficient because we can just do share screen and I can walk you through that process. Towards the middle of this page are going to be our contact information, so our phone number and our email address. I'm happy to provide my email address as well. If you want to set up an individual appointment with one of our mentors to talk about anything, please give us a call. We'll get you set up. Our social media is going to be listed on the bottom. We do have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We post a new scholarship every single Monday, so we have a large bank of scholarships that we post. We just posted one yesterday, so I highly recommend giving us a follow, and you can apply to a scholarship every week just by following us. Besides that, this again was just a brief overview of the FAFSA, so I didn't go into too much detail, just some tips and tricks. For those folks who are watching the recording later, please feel free to let us know if you have any questions. I will divert to the chat box to see if anyone has some questions. I'll hang out for a few minutes to see if there's anything you all need. But thank you so much for attending. I hope this was helpful. Give us a call, send us an email, or just follow us on social media if that's the easiest way to communicate for you, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. Thank you. Yes, I saw a message from JM. And JM, yes, our services are free to all students. So it doesn't matter. We also work with adult returners as well. So if you need to meet with us, please let us know. We are a free resource. Yeah, great question. So JM asked again, could you explain what first come, first serve works when and if students change schools? So I think I might need some clarification. So the way the FAFSA works is that a student is going to list all of the schools that they're hoping to attend, and they're going to need to apply to those schools separately. So list it on the FAFSA and then apply to that school separately, and then the school will receive that FAFSA. So even if a student chooses, let's say a student in November says, I'm going to go to NAU, and then in April decides they're going to go to U of A, as long as a student has a FAFSA on file and has applied to that school, they would still be eligible for the same amount of financial aid. Does that answer your question? So it doesn't change. Oh, sorry, I think my video went strange. Could you explain? So it doesn't impact from the month change that they submitted it. No, so if as long as a school, here we go. Hold on, sorry, my video was kind of being weird. I was trying to get rid of this screen. Let me see, folks, if I can. Okay, so JM asked again. So it doesn't impact from the month change that they submitted it. No, so once a student has a FAFSA on file, so it opens October 1st, as long as they also have applied to that school. So again, if a student intends on attending University of Arizona, they would want to apply to that school sometime in the fall semester, as well as complete the FAFSA close to October 1. Then they want to make sure that all of their information is supplied via the FAFSA and via the college application to that school, so that they're eligible for the most amount of aid. I think also what you might be touching on is the priority deadline. So for example, most universities have a priority deadline for financial aid. So for example, for Northern Arizona University, that priority deadline is November 15th. So they want you to have your FAFSA completed by November 15th in order to receive the most amount of aid. I hope that answers your question. So we want the student to complete the FAFSA as close to October 1 as possible, and then also apply to the schools as close to that priority deadline as possible. And if it's easier, Jam, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask, and we can chat through just the video if that's easiest. And again, if you have any additional questions, we can meet individually about your student, and we can formulate a plan to make sure that they get offered the most amount of financial aid as possible. Oh, awesome, Jam, that's awesome. You can also, we could start working with your student early and just kind of formulate a plan. We also offer career advising. So if your student is not sure what they want to do or what schools they're looking at, as well as ACT and SAT test prep, we can work with them individually. So the other person on the call right now is one of my mentors, Amy. Amy's awesome, and she's actually a retired teacher who's working with us through an AmeriCorps term. So if your student was interested in meeting with her, we could schedule a time, go over some career advising. We could start looking at schools, start determining what ACT or SAT score they might need and what kind of grades and classes they might need. So I always tell folks the sooner the better.